Thanks, Nick. Good morning, everybody, and thanks for coming. So the title of my presentation was Dunkin Mobile Runs on New Relic. So everybody's probably heard the Dunkin marketing phrase, America runs on Dunkin. So what I want to talk a little bit about is some of our customer journey in terms of how we brought New Relic into the organization and how the mobile application really truly it does run on New Relic, and it's what makes us successful for meeting the customer expectation. So my name is Matt Kraft. I'm the Director of Software Development and Architecture at Dunkin Brands. I started there just about 3 years ago today and previously worked for a number of other companies, including Yum Brands, where I was working in that QSR space as well. My career is really focused on these customer-facing, high-volume transaction systems, and that's what really gets me excited every day is when we're dealing with things that happen on large scale. I work in the Boston area at Dunkin headquarters, but I live in Louisville, Kentucky, so I get to commute back and forth every day. It's a really great life decision, and I encourage anyone who has the opportunity to do something like that to do so. But when I was kind of talking about the presentation, and I always tell this to our representatives, our salespeople, other customers, one of the first things that I try to do is implement New Relic systems into the businesses that I'm working on. And there's a number of reasons why that. It's a lot of lessons learned over history, but the number one reason that I'm trying to bring New Relic into systems is I prefer to sleep in the morning. That's Fred the Baker. Some people may recognize Fred the Baker from the 80s and 90s campaigns, you know, the time to make the donuts guy. And it always showed him getting up really early in the morning and trudging off to work so that he could go make the donuts. That's not me. I don't want to be up early in the morning. And so I went to work for a business where the highest volume of traffic is between 6 and 9 a.m. So that was just not working out real well. And as I started working there, I was like, something's got to change. Just quick disclaimer, a lot of the slides in here are non-production data and all the financial numbers are coming out of publicly available data. So when I'm going to take you a little bit through the journey of launching the on-the-go ordering product. I've kind of given everything these eras kind of names, the Dark Ages, the Renaissance, the Age of Enlightenment, and we'll go through some lessons learned. But it really does fit into Nick's presentation that he just gave in terms of the crisis, the challenge, and the epiphany. And I actually didn't really know those three terms were being used in his presentation prior to this, but a lot of this will tie right back into that. So Dunkin Brands, I'm pretty sure everybody in the room knows the business. We're a beverage-led on-the-go brand, 8,800 plus US restaurants, 6.5 million Perks loyalty members, and over $1 billion in DD card system sales, with 500 million of that coming through our mobile application. So it's a very significant footprint of our mobile users. If you're not familiar with Dunkin Brands, you know, there's 500 of them in New York City alone, so just walk in any block, any direction for about 2 minutes and you'll find one. There we go. So a lot of what I'll talk about today and kind of in getting here is the Dunkin mobile application. And I'm just curious, as a show of hands, has anybody used the Dunkin mobile app? All right, anybody used on-the-go ordering? All right, a number of people actually. Yeah, so one of the great things about the on-the-go ordering system is that it lets you get in and out of Dunkin' Donuts more quickly. It lets you move quickly. It lets you skip what can be a very long line. I stopped at a Dunkin' Donuts on the way here, and it was below ground in some subway station, and kind of a little bit of an odd place to walk into for me to get into a Dunkin' Donuts. And while I was walking down there, I noticed that there was a line still out the door at 8:30 in the morning in New York. So I hadn't had the foresight, because I don't know the area, to use on-the-go ordering, so I had to go stand in that line. But my goal, just like many of our customers, is to get in and out of there quickly and get on their way. I was commuting, you know, from my hotel to here, and so I was in a hurry, and I was going, boy, I wish I'd ordered ahead. So it's not really just because I work on the product. It's a real advantage to our customer. But the main features that are in the Dunkin mobile application are what it started out as a loyalty and rewards application. It's what gave our marketing team the ability to reward our frequent customers with points and push special offers to them to give them some sort of advantage. And then in addition to that, it has the card payment system. So with that loyalty program, we use a stored value kind of gift card associated with that payment. That's where that 500 million plus of sales and those digital payments is coming from. But the real big evolution for the application in the last year is the mobile ordering. Now, for me, it's sometimes hard to remember that a year ago, or a year and 3 months ago, we didn't have mobile ordering. It wasn't something that was there. There was a time before that, and it's such a big part of our business and such a big success that it's almost impossible to imagine life without it. But what I want to talk about is a little bit about what it took to get mobile ordering launched and where we came from and the role New Relic played into that. One of the things that we experienced, though, and this gets back into this digital moments of truth track, the way we kind of look at it internally, we have a digital moment of truth every 2 minutes. And I'm not even, we kind of pulled that number out of thin air, but the notion is, if you place a mobile order for a cup of coffee, this isn't like ordering, new accessories for your home from Amazon, or this isn't like in a previous business I worked in, ordering a pizza. If you order a pizza, what's your expectation for how long it can take for that pizza to get there? And you're comfortable with 20 minutes, 30 minutes, 45 minutes. Probably don't start getting upset for an hour. So if it takes a minute or 2 minutes for that order to pop up in the store and somebody to start working on making that, people are going to notice whether it took a minute or two to get in the store. When you were ordering from a traditional e-commerce company, nobody's going to be all that upset if it takes 5 minutes or 10 minutes for that order to enter into the fulfillment system for somebody to start pulling it off a warehouse shelf and figure out delivery. If you're lucky enough to live in like New York where you have same-day delivery, you may expect it to get there that afternoon, but there's still a lot of time for those transactions to flow through from a computer standpoint. With the mobile ordering application, when you go place a mobile order, we've got to do a number of things. At a very high level, we've got to identify your location. You have to be able to select the restaurant that you're going to order from. We've got to build out the order. You've got to pick your menu items, put them in a basket. We have to process payment. We have to apply loyalty points and loyalty transactions and all the things that you would expect for that order, just as if you were walking into the store ordering on site. So when you walk into a store, if you placed your order and checked in, you're not going to be okay waiting 30 minutes. I don't think anybody's going to be okay waiting 30 minutes for a cup of coffee. Definitely not till later that afternoon. We have a digital moment of truth where a human being has walked into the store and is standing at the counter looking for their cup of coffee, looking for their breakfast sandwich. And if it's not ready, if it's not there, we're experiencing that digital moment of truth. So that puts a very low level of tolerance in terms of how quickly these transactions can flow through the system. So 2014, this is when I will give myself a little bit of leeway by saying that's when I started at Dunkin. So I refer to 2014 as the dark ages. And it's not the dark ages because we were persecuting those people who believed that the earth revolved around the sun. I'm calling it the dark ages because at that point we were in the dark. We didn't have a lot of good information around what our systems were doing. And to be frank, there was a legacy architecture. We had no Java instrumentation. We were using logs for primary troubleshooting. And to give you a hint, some of these logs would get up to 2 gigabytes by 10 a.m. If you try to VI a 2 gigabyte log, it's not going to work. So that was our solution for going after and figuring out problems. That's a real screenshot that I kind of redacted a little bit to show something that I sent to one of our operations guys and said, one of our tech vendor partners is not responding to a web service call. If you can see, we're getting connection refused. So we actually had to go through a whole process of pulling information out of logs, emailing it to each other, having phone calls and discussions to try and troubleshoot that. It was not a very successful way to run a platform. But again, this was the pre-mobile ordering days. We still had a very healthy and very active business around the loyalty and around the payment transactions. We knew mobile ordering was coming in 2014, though. We had started a POC. It was very small, it was internal, and we were writing new software. But at this time, we knew we were going to have challenges with the way we were operating. So that's when I kind of went back to my crutch, to what I was used to. We knew we needed to bring in APM, and we also needed to bring in synthetics. APM came into our environment, much like Nick mentioned. It was one of those situations, in his presentation, it was one of those situations where we installed APM because we knew we had problems on our application servers, on our legacy architecture. And when we put APM, we had that kind of aha moment of, oh no. Look at all the terrible stuff that's going on in the background. There's no way we can continue operating. It's almost like cleaning out the attic or cleaning out the basement. You get visibility into things that you would never want to acknowledge are going on in your system. Again, these are just some random, I actually had to go back into my email logs and see if I could find some old troubleshooting incidents that we were working through. And I can say, like, at least in that top 5 web transactions, I don't remember exactly what went wrong, but something went really wrong in that time frame. So that was the kind of stuff we were going through sometimes daily and definitely weekly in our web systems and in our legacy mobile system. So as we were working through that, we had to go through a massive cleanup effort. One of my boss's original statements was, boy, you know what would be great? It would be great if I knew about the problems before customer care, before our customer help desk called us and told us that people were unhappy. That gets into another interesting and unique kind of Dunkin-esque aspect to writing software. We have amazing customers who are extremely vocal. They're extreme fans of the product. We become part of their lifestyle, part of their commute. So when you interrupt somebody's day by not being able to do what they need to do, not being able to reload their loyalty card, they can't access their free coffee reward. These are customers who will take time out of the day. They'll take a half an hour to call in and sit on hold, get a hold of the customer care help desk, and make them exactly aware of how inconvenient that was for their morning. And it's not 1 or 2 people. It's not the same one angry, loud person. We get throngs of these calls whenever there's a problem. So my boss said, could we please find out about these problems before the customers start calling and telling us? And so that's what we started working on in 2014. And APM and synthetics were the tools that really got us there. So getting into 2015, this is what I'm going to call the Renaissance era. So this is where, if you look at 2014 as the crisis, 2015 and 2016 were the challenge. And it wasn't just one challenge. We knew that the legacy architecture wasn't going to support what we wanted to do going forward. So that's the first place where we had to bring some help from New Relic in. We were working with re-architecting our web services platforms, our integration platforms, our mobile APIs to support what we knew was going to be a higher volume of traffic. So what we did was actually not all that innovative, but we were load testing against our redeveloped architecture, running simulated production loads, and not just running them, we were running them at 10x volume over what we were seeing in production today. And our goal was to build out significant capacity. Now, what New Relic was doing was exposing our weak points. It was exposing which external vendors were not capable of responding in a sufficient amount of time. It was helping us make better decisions around how do you can't control other people's environments, but how do you react and respond effectively when an upstream provider decides they're going to refuse your connection or they're just going to go down that morning. So you can make better decisions from the consumer side about how to exception handle that in the application. But we were able to eliminate a lot of system bottlenecks. And meanwhile, during this time, a number of us were working on the mobile POC. It had already been publicly announced, and our leadership teams had kind of told investors, told the public, hey, we're going to start piloting mobile ordering in a limited number of stores by the end of the year in 2015, and we're going to figure out a national launch. This had been communicated, so it wasn't like we were going to change our minds and take a little bit longer or move back. The problems that we had in the dark ages was a lack of information. It was a lack of useful information to make decisions. So what we knew going into the mobile application POC, mobile ordering POC, I should say, was that we were going to be asked a lot of questions. One of the questions that I think that, one of the kind of results of being asked questions by the business, and people may have heard this before, is, well, you guys are in IT. Don't you know that? How many people are doing this? What's going on here? Why is it slow? What's not working? The assumption is, you guys are in IT. You should know why this stuff is not working. So we were anticipating a pretty good uptake in mobile ordering. But we were also anticipating a need to be able to speak to the business and speak back to our customers about why we were having problems, or who was using the application, how they were using it, how effective were we being. And that's where, before we ever got to the point of launching a public beta of the mobile ordering application, we worked back with our partners at New Relic to bring the mobile APM tool into the mobile application. So this got into the planning for scale. During this phase, we really started to build out a system that we felt like we were pretty comfortable was going to be able to meet the needs of the business. Again, anticipating good uptake in the mobile application, a reasonable uptake, anticipating potential high volume loads, anticipating those peak morning bits of traffic. We were feeling really good about this. This is, again, we're calling it the Renaissance. We'd embraced technology, we'd embraced growth, and we thought everything was going pretty well. To be honest, the technology team was kind of sitting around patting themselves on the back. Everything felt really, really good. But of course, it's all about managing expectations. So we were still a little bit nervous because we didn't know what to expect when we launched the on-the-go mobile ordering. So we were always a little bit nervous because marketing partners tend to get really big ideas. They want to do everything in a big way. And one of the days while we were working on this application, we'd been sitting around in conference rooms going, well, wouldn't it be great if we had 3 mobile orders a store a day? What if we got 5? What's 10? What's success look like? Marketing pulls us into a room and says, let's show you the ad campaign that we're looking at running on social media. So we all got in the room.
Watch how fast I can get my Dunkin.
They showed us that a month before launch. Now, suffice to say, our jaws were on the table. Everybody on the technology, on the engineering team was just sitting there going, oh my God. And our marketing partners were like, cool, right? So it was an amazing marketing campaign. It was something really unique and special. But that gets back into why it was so important for us to be ready for a really, really big launch. And to be very, very honest, it was a very successful launch. When we launched in June of 2016, and that marketing campaign started to run, things went really, really well. So that gets us into where we're at today, 2016 and beyond, the age of mobile enlightenment. So calling this the Age of Enlightenment is in 2016 was where we finally got past some of these really early scaling problems, the initial big challenges. Mobile ordering is 2% and growing of our total transactions. That, when you take 2% of a very large number of transactions, it's a very large number. One of the things that I like to remind my team is doing anything 1,000 times a minute, 10,000 times a minute, that's easy. When you start doing things 100,000 times a minute, you start doing things millions of times an hour, that's when it becomes a little bit of a challenge. That's when things get tricky. But our response times for any kind of upstream outages, for issues that I mentioned before, where we had to email back and forth, we had to have big, long conversations about whose issues are taking our system down, whose issues are causing a negative consumer impact. Our response time for those are in minutes, not hours. We're resolving those things very quickly. We're resolving those things programmatically so that we're not having to wait for customers to call into our consumer care team. The Perks loyalty card now accounts for 10% of U.S. sales for payments. Their internal system downtime is extremely low. And again, it really is always the knock on wood moment. But right now, our internally managed web service systems are virtually never down. And a lot of that is really attributed to the early work we did with New Relic APM to make sure that we were scaled properly. So we'll have individual servers that we have to take out of rotation. We'll have code deploys that, as Lou was mentioning earlier, don't go so well, and we'll have to revert something back. We've got good rollback plans. But in terms of total system failures, I honestly can't think of one that's happened this year. That's a large difference from where we were in 2014. So the other thing that happened in 2016, and the real reason I'm calling it the Age of Mobile Enlightenment, is that's when we started taking a serious look at insights and what it could tell us. Up until this point, we've been very focused on the operational aspect of how to run a large web system, how to run a large mobile ordering platform. And we were getting tons of data, and we weren't really making good use of it. So this is where we started growing the mobile platform. As we started getting that larger scale uptake of users, we wanted to bring in insights to get a more holistic view of the mobile ordering environment and to really help some of our decision making. Now, the order funnel that I have pictured over there, and I've got a few more slides of what we've done with insights. We've got the ability now to look at the mobile application from a consumer experience standpoint. So, interesting, we're very curious about conversion and how many people begin an order and ultimately continue to check out and pay for that order. So we're able to capture those types of insights from insights. Well, some of the dashboards that we put out there, and this one is actually slightly bit mocked up because I was trying to keep anything that was, super business financials off of there. But we can see how many QR code payments people are pulling up to pay in the store. We can see where they're paying. We can see, what activities they're doing, how many account enrollments we have going on. And as one of the things that I'm sure you will have no issue with me quoting on, my boss will frequently tell me the first thing he does every morning is gets out his cell phone. He opens it up and makes sure that there's no new Relic alerts. Then he flips over, checks out a few dashboards. Everything looks good. All right, I can go back to sleep for another 30 minutes. We had become conditioned at a point to where everybody was waking up at 5 or 6 in the morning doing the exact same thing, but we weren't looking for alerts. We were looking for, punching through the application with our hand, placing an order, because that was what was necessary at early phases to figure out if things were working well. The other dashboard we have, I mentioned I live in Louisville, Kentucky, and I'll tell you, Boston and New York are very different, 500 plus Dunkins in the New York area. I couldn't even begin to tell you how many in Boston, but it's a lot. Louisville doesn't have so many. So I've got a handy dashboard for my boss, so he can see how many times somebody's placing a mobile order in Louisville. And the natural assumption for him is it's probably me. So he can use that to check and make sure when I'm working remotely that I'm doing something productive. So some of the lessons learned, though, that we've had, and actually it was really interesting for me sitting through the keynote because I almost hated presenting this slide because now I'm going to feel like, well, I think the answers were kind of, the answers to some of my lessons learned were out there in the keynote, but initially alerting. And this is a little bit unique to the volume and the velocity of transactions that we have coming through our systems. Given kind of the history that we had during the dark ages, we're so very sensitive to outages and what a 5-minute outage or a 10-minute outage means from a revenue and a customer standpoint, that our alerting is, frankly, overly sensitive. Now, one of the things that I think that we're going to be looking for that to me was just wonderful in the keynote was the baseline, the AI kind of baseline reporting. If something can tell us that you have an anomaly, instead of breaching a certain threshold. So right now we have a lot of arbitrary thresholds. Historically, that's a little bit problematic, and we're a little bit oversensitive. We get over-alerted a lot right now, and that's okay given our business sensitivity toward where we're trying to get to. But looking at those AI, those baseline reporting metrics, that's something that I think is going to be a big help to us. Third-party APIs, again, this is something that we're still always looking for the right answer on. Whenever you include a third-party API in a mobile application, you always get all sorts of extra goodies, their own analytics callouts, their own service providers that their API may take advantage of, and they may not have the same level or threshold of resiliency that we would expect on our side. So sometimes they're non-problematic, they're non-consumer impacting, but we'll still get alerts based on some third-party mobile API that we're not really all that concerned about. So lots of opportunities for us to improve our processes and how we refine that there. We're definitely oversensitive, but I'm going to be pursuing a lot of the information that was from the keynote this morning. Vendor visibility. So in an ideal world, all of your vendors, all of your upstream partners would be using New Relic, and you would all be part of the same New Relic production environment so that you can see what's happening across those. When you get into challenges such as a multi-tenant and shared vendor environment where they may be hosting data for somebody else as well as you, whether it's just an issue with their corporate policy or how they choose to do things, sometimes you get those vendor visibility gaps. Our mobile application by nature is very composite. We've partnered with a lot of people, and for the most part it works very well. One of our key partners does use New Relic, but they're not using New Relic in a way that it's a multi-tenant platform, so they can't expose their data to us. So that's one of those things where you can address those problems, but at certain points it does push you back into manual workarounds. It's the we know why you're slow, we know you're slow, but we don't know why you're slow type of situations. In the ideal state, you would have all of your vendor partners using the same instance, but that for us, because of the composite nature of our application, is not something that we've been able to solve. So it does require us to have good processes around what we've done. Business data. So the other thing that I've learned, I'm a tremendous fan of insights and what we've been able to get out of there. You can really come up with some really neat slides, like a slide that talks about how many people in Louisville, Kentucky are doing any given activity. I'm fascinated with that data. Nobody else is, but I am. So the challenge we have with insights is that it ultimately requires some level of business discipline. We've tried to get most of our insights dashboards developed by the same software engineers who are working to build the APIs, the same ones who are working to build and architect the mobile application. And what it kind of comes down to, and the lesson we've learned over that is, that's an area where you really have to engage with the business. Engage with your BI team and analysts. Engage with the internal customers that you're trying to serve this data to. Because software engineers are not always the best, most equipped people to ask the right questions. So that's something that over the last year, we were probably beating our head up against the wall a little bit to try and get to where we wanted to. And we sort of had to throw our hands up and say, let's bring in the business and start talking to them. So it's a growth step, but it's something where I think going into that with an open mind and saying, let's get the business in from day one. Let's get people who can actually talk about the utility of the business data that you would pull out of insights is very helpful. What's next? Well, Baskin-Robbins APN. Dunkin Brands, in case you didn't know this, also owns Baskin-Robbins. So Baskin has a mobile application. Baskin is integrated with a similar set of back-end services that we provide internally. And we're kind of going along the very same journey, and it's a very repeatable process that we've come up to. So we're definitely have not reached the age of mobile enlightenment from a monitoring and instrumentation and a processy standpoint with Baskin-Robbins, but we've got a blueprint, we've done it before, and we're walking down that same path as that application grows. Curbside ordering. This is just another one that I think is interesting. We just recently announced curbside ordering. So getting back to this digital moments of truth again. Nobody wants to wait for something that's supposed to be a very quick transaction. So with mobile ordering, we've got the obvious use cases around drive-through and walk-in or check-in or dine-in. So as people may come up to a counter or may go through a drive-through, we're now offering in certain locations based on real estate and based on what's available, the restaurants can opt into the curbside to give people an additional way to get their order and pull into a spot, have somebody walk out, hand them their coffee or hand them their bag, they pull out and leave. So again, a speed of service type of initiative, something we're trying to really improve the customer experience, but something that has a very low tolerance for latency or a delay or a failed check-in. So I'd like to thank you all for coming. I'm happy to answer any questions, talk about what we've done, or if anybody wants to meet later, we can go in depth a little bit. But any questions from here? Go ahead, Nick.
So the New Relic question for you.
Yeah.
What's the most painful part of our product for you?
the tricky one, going back to the lessons learned. Oh, sorry. So what's the most painful part of the product, the new Relic product for Dunkin'? Going back to those lessons learned, I'm not going to say that it's the multi-vendor solution challenges, but it would be nice if we had the ability to have vendors carve off part of their analytics that are coming in and merge them into our environment. That may be a little bit of a fantasy land, but that would be nice. But for me, historically, it has been around alerting. So it's not that alerting is not effective, but because of the way our application is structured and we want to key on very specific KPIs, and we want to be very conditional with how we alert. And I don't think that everybody operates that way, but from our standpoint, the more controls, the more leverage we have to pull around how we trigger an alert and why, and what conditionals we can put around it, the more effective we are in terms of being responsive. I'd never admit to having certain systems that have normal levels of errors and normal levels of failure, but we do. And so those systems, we're trying to tolerate that normal without false alarming. But again, that gets back to where I'm really interested in this AI kind of baseline measurements. If the system can tell us what's anomalous and what's not, that's going to solve one of our biggest pain points. So I'll be digging into that one. Sure. What's our cloud platform? For the stuff that we manage, it's primarily AWS. And that was again, going back into that the Renaissance, that was part of the Renaissance. It was getting off of a hosted VPC and into AWS. I can give you a lot of detail about how we did that later, but it was a pretty big success story. And again, in terms of how do we size, scale, how do we work back with the Amazon architects to figure out what services we need to be using, all of that was driven by data coming out of APM. There was very little guessing that was going on there. So there was an iterative process of take production data, simulate, run, load, test, and provide that feedback to Amazon so that we could go out, not over purchase, but go out of the gate right sized. Sure.
What were your challenges, if you could, on the corporate level to convince a more traditional
Yeah.
Organization to be that open with allowing that much activity on a customer level, sharing it, everything being run on what they may consider to be unconventional? What was if you could?
Yeah, sure. Fortunately, so the question is, what were my challenges around getting a kind of a traditionally minded business to be that open and to be progressive with how we're looking at consumer data? It's a good question because, in fairness, Dunkin' is a very traditional kind of QSR retail organization. We're not a tech company, and my team is not a technical team. And for that matter, historically, we're very small. We run very lean. We take a lot of advantage of technology partners and consulting organizations to help us meet our goals. I think the biggest challenge for us in terms of the business. Well, let me step back. I have a very technically minded leadership team within IT. So through my IT organization, they've been here, they've been on this journey. Most of the people that I work with, my boss, my CIO, they've launched mobile applications and mobile ordering before. So they kind of get it. The big challenge in the business is there's a significant investment, especially like on the insights for when you're dealing with this kind of volume. For us, we had to take baby steps. We could not rush in. The reason this is a journey that took 2 years was we had to build credibility for what a technology can do to solve problems like this. And it wasn't something that we were able to just turn on overnight or convince the team that we were just going to roll day one and then start using. So that's going back to why my slides kind of build out the way they do and where we started in 2014 and 15. You build the credibility by solving the really big problems with, from my standpoint, APM is one of those tools it's cost effective enough that there's almost no excuse for not having it. And once you start saying, hey, look, remember how things were a month or 2 or 3 ago and we've taken that problem off the plate? Now we can do that again, or we can prevent that in the mobile space, or we can stop the bottleneck on information cascade in terms of like what we can get out of insights. And we built it based on the credibility of what we did with the early phases of the project. It was 2 years. And I wish, and when I was watching Lou give the speech this morning about moving fast, I'm going to say that for us, that was moving fast. So. Sure.
So for your mobile, I'm wondering what kind of instrumentation did you do? Did you put trays on like specific workflows that you want to
Yeah, so custom attributes are something that we are implementing now. So right now, out of the box, we got quite a bit of what we needed. This kind of gets into one of those things that, especially around mobile, you have options when you build it. If you're building an application from scratch, or if you're building a web services layer from scratch, you have options around how you name services, how you call services. You can go back to the model of you have one controller or one giant servlet that does everything, and you just pass it some argument and it falls through a switch. At that point, you start losing visibility into what you're doing, and you get a lot of great information about something that means very little. So we kind of took advantage of the fact that we were building new to be very thoughtful about how we were naming and how we were breaking out pieces of functionality, and they were tied back to those services. It limited the amount of custom attribution that we had to do out of the gate to get value, because in that situation, we were moving so fast to try and get to meet dates on the mobile ordering launch that we had to that we didn't get to do everything we wanted to do the first time. Now, as we're going through as a second pass, we're going back and adding custom attribution to get better information, like that ordering funnel, so we know exactly not just that people are going from here to here to here, but how much they move around within a certain flow, within a certain session. So that's where we're bringing custom attributes to do those types of things. But I would encourage both. Yes, custom attributes within mobile are a great way to get to that detail. But on the other hand, being smart about how you build your application and knowing what you're going to see when you instrument it, so that things are properly named, not vague, they don't take ambiguous flows through the source code, can be a benefit in the long run. Okay, yes?
Are you using the business data and insights to change the way that the mobile app interacts with your customers, or is it really more for internal operations side?
So I'm going to say yes, I'm going to say yes, but it's one of those areas where, the question, are we using the mobile, the insights data to change to affect how we make decisions on changing the mobile application from like a customer experience and a flow standpoint? The answer is yes. We use a number of tools to help us get there, but the data that's coming out of insights gives us really good information around how people are using within sessions specific bits of functionality, and we understand, and it gets us the ability to know that when we run a marketing campaign or a promotion, how successful are we being in that? How well is it driving people through a certain intended path or behavior? Sometimes we've been able to determine things like, right now, if you use the application, you'll find there's a lot of clicks that it takes to get to maybe, say, placing an order, a lot of clicks that it takes to get to completing an application. And we're kind of seeing which patterns take the heaviest usage through the application, and it's helping us make decisions around how we should rework some of those flows and some of those screens. The location services is one that we're fiddling with frequently, because one of the most important things to do is be able to find a store. We're able to use data from insights to figure out what's problematic in terms of moving people from that part of the application into the actual ordering phase. But again, this is where we're into the age of enlightenment. We have the data, becoming very good at using it. That gets back in terms of that business analysis. The engineers have the data, and we can make some decisions based on it, but we haven't really got to where we can turn that into cause, action, effect in terms of UI, UX. I think we'll be there, in a year, but we're growing into that as well. Diane? Yeah.
Number one, I don't know if you said this or not, but I think that video won us a bunch of.
It did. I don't remember what the exact names of the awards were, but our marketing team got tremendous kudos for it. And despite the amount of anxiety and fear, let me rephrase that, extreme anxiety and fear that instilled on the technical engineering team when we saw that video, in terms of just the kind of lift, the excitement it generated for the application. It was amazing. The marketing team got lots of recognition for that, and again, it's always fun. It's fun. Dunkin' is a fun brand to work for. We do cool stuff. Nobody ever gets all that upset over the business of selling coffee, the business of selling donuts. So when you get to have a wingsuit diver jump off a mountain, and that's related to something that you're doing, that's a pretty good day.
And I think Lou would say that video was a catalyst for your behavior and for the effort that you put in.
It absolutely was. That was a crystallizing moment for all of us.
One other question. You mentioned that you migrated to AWS, and you mentioned that you had an AWS technical architect, I believe, help you.
Yes.
Do you want to say just a few words about how you went about that migration and what helped you go from, because you said that you're not really a very big technical organization, et cetera, so you might want to share a little of that.
Right. So effectively, the way we got to the AWS migration was, and the question is, how did we kind of work through that AWS migration process? We knew we needed to scale. We had all that information coming out of APM, and we knew we weren't going to be where we needed to be. In terms of there was all the normal business decisions around AWS is the right decision. So after that, we tend to have engineers or architects internally who do plan, design, and develop our internal applications. But AWS is one of those kind of challenging organizations because they make a lot of great products, but they make a lot of great products. So figuring out what to buy, how to buy it, what to configure, what to use. There's 10 different ways to go build out hundreds of ways to build out an application stack in AWS. That's where we started getting their architects, and we started taking our goals, our metric goals, and saying, all right, so if we need to push this type of data through this type of an interaction, how would you go build that out if you were building it for your system? And then they were the ones bringing in recommendations to say, well, you probably need this much, this much of this component, this much of that component. And that's an ongoing process. As we're starting to fragment, bits of our kind of monolithic core code base into more microservices, we're still working back with the AWS team to make those decisions. And it's a little bit of an experimental process, but the AWS engineers really help us with that kind of product selection, sizing, and what tools they can provide that work well together. So they give us the architecture blueprint, but we ultimately implement.
Would you ever start implementing the Lambda functions rather than having to go through all that process?
So would we ever consider implementing the Lambda functions instead of going through all that process? So we're experimenting with that today. It is a kind of a gray area and a challenge because it's new territory. We have one that we've implemented and it's in production. And I would consider that for us we're learning phase. So getting back to the earlier question about moving quick, how quickly it took us to move with New Relic, we're in the amount of business we're trying to protect in terms of this application. We're going to move slowly with just changing technology that we know works. So very interested in it, but I've got some we happy to talk about it offline. But I've got some challenges and concerns about what happens when you start implementing services through that. One of which is data visibility. So I kind of feel we've had some challenges with getting the metrics we need out of service running through Lambda that we're looking for. So it's something that I'm looking for insight and other people's experience with as well, so we can learn together. Okay, thanks very much.